Force can be broadly classified into two types. Force exists in nature that affect the movement of humans. A common classification is contact and non-contact force. Contact force and a non-contact force. What is a contact force? The best example for contact force is a cricketer playing cricket, and when he hits the ball comes in contact with the bat, which is a contact force. Force on account of direct physical contact between two interacting objects is called as contact force. The force which occurs without any physical contact between two objects is known as the force at a distance or a non-contact force. These are some important questions for the topic of contact force. Now, contact force. Contact forces are those forces which can act only when objects are in physical contact with each other and bring about necessary changes. The following are the types of contact force. They are muscular force, frictional force, and mechanical force. Muscular force is a contact force in all the actions that we perform in our daily life, like brushing, bathing, eating, writing, or walking. We have to exert a contact force. The force which we exert by using our body muscles is called as a muscular force. Muscular force. All animals and human beings use their muscles to do work. You can see the picture here. The muscle exerts force on the object that brings its motion. Muscular force can also change the speed of moving bodies. Muscular force. All animals and human beings use their muscles to do work. The muscles exert force on the object that brings its motion. Muscular force can be exerted only through contact. You can see here, only when there is a contact, there is a muscular force. Frictional force. A ball moving on the ground comes to rest after moving through some distance. It's a frictional force. A vehicle comes to rest once its engine is switched off. We know that some force is required to stop a moving body. Therefore, some force must be exerted by the ground on them to stop them. This force is called as the frictional force or the force of friction. We can define friction as follows. When two surfaces slide each other, the force which opposes this motion is called as frictional force of friction. As the force of friction arises when the surfaces of the two objects come in contact with each other, it is called a contact force. These are the important questions of non-contact forces. In a non-contact force, some forces do not involve physical contact between the bodies on which they act. They act through the space between them. Some forces or such forces are called non-contact forces or forces acting at a distance. You can see the diagram, an apple falling down. This is actually a gravitational force. So we can classify non-contact forces into different types. The following are the types of non-contact forces. They are magnetic force, electrostatic force, and gravitational force. Magnetic force. The force exerted by a magnet on iron objects is called as magnetic force. Electrostatic force. The force which results due to the repulsion of similar charges or attraction of opposite charges is called electrostatic force. An example here is a charged balloon attracts the pieces of paper. You can rub two balloons together and bring one balloon in contact with the bits of paper, small bits of paper. The balloon will attract the paper. Or you can also take an example of combing your hair and bringing the comb near the bits of paper is also an example of electrostatic force. Students, please try this activity in your home. Gravitational force. Newton's law of universal gravitation, which states that any two bodies in the universe attract each other with a force that is directly proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. You will be learning about Newton's law of gravitational forces in class 9. Force acting on objects. There can be action of two or more forces acting on an object. Here we can see an example of one force acting on an object. A force is always exerted by an object and always acts on another object. Here, for example, you can see how this man is trying to push this trolley and the force of the man makes the trolley move. Another example, this is an example of net force. Net force is the resultant force combining all the force exerted on an object. Here, the boy and the girl are trying to move the piano to one direction. Forces in the same direction. The girl moves with a force of 25 newtons. The unit of force is newtons. And the boy moves with a force of 20 newtons. So the net force will be equal to 25 newtons plus 20 newtons, which is equal to 45 newtons to the right, because they are applying the force in the same direction. A net force acting on a stationary object will move the object. You can see this man. Net force acting on a car. It can lift the object or move the object. Forces come in pairs. Force have a magnitude and a direction. Magnitude is the amount, the degree of the force, and direction is which direction the force is acting for, whether it is north, south, east, west. This is a very good example of balanced and unbalanced force. We all have seen this when we go to a grocery shop. Balanced and unbalanced forces. Forces occur in pairs as they can be either balanced or unbalanced force. When the first picture shows the example of a balanced force and the second picture shows the example of an unbalanced force. This is a typical example of a balanced force. A stationary object will not move while the forces acting on it are balanced. For example, if I tell both the girls are applying a force of 10 newtons, the object will not move from its position because they are applying the same amount of force. So we call them as a balanced force. Balanced forces do not cause change in the motion. They are equal in size and opposite in direction. You can see here. The example of a balanced force. Unbalanced force. When the net force of an object is not zero, the force on object are unbalanced. An unbalanced force always causes a change in the motion. So you can see both of them moving the object in the same direction. So there will be a change in the motion of an object.